You're still angry about something that happened years ago. You know you should let it go. You've tried. It doesn't work. That's not a character flaw. That's because the first night you slept on it, your brain locked it in. And every night since has made it harder to undo. What I want to show you is why your brain treats old anger like a survival instinct it can't afford to delete, and why Paul's one instruction in Ephesians contains the exact neurological deadline science has now confirmed. By the end, you'll know the specific window your brain gives you to stop resentment from becoming permanent, and one thing you can do before sundown this week to use it. Stage 1, the experience. It comes back at odd moments. Driving, showering, lying in bed at 2 in the morning. Someone said something. Someone did something. It might have been 5 years ago. It might have been 20. You've told yourself it doesn't matter anymore. Your body disagrees. Why can't you just stop? The answer is structural. It's in your brain. And it started the night you first fell asleep angry. Stage 2. Why your brain holds grudges. Your brain holds grudges for 3 specific, measurable reasons. The first is that betrayal activates your pain circuits. In 2003, a team at UCLA published a study in Science that changed how neuroscientists think about social pain. They put people inside an fMRI scanner and had them play a simple ball-tossing game. Then, they rigged the game to exclude them. The other players stopped throwing the ball. When the exclusion happened, the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex lit up, the same region that activates during physical pain. The brain does not distinguish between a broken bone and a broken trust. The same alarm fires for both. That's why old betrayals still sting. Your brain filed them as injuries. The second reason is that grudges give you a dopamine hit. In 2004, researchers at the University of Zurich published findings in Science showing that punishing someone who wronged you activates the dorsal striatum, a reward processing center. The stronger the activation, the more the person was willing to pay, out of their own pocket, to deliver the punishment. Every time you replay the grievance in your head, imagining what you should have said, what they deserved, your reward system fires a small hit. That's why grudges feel oddly satisfying. Your brain is feeding the loop. The third reason is a hijack inside your brain's background operating system. Your brain has something called the default mode network. It runs when you're not focused on a task, when you're daydreaming, reflecting, thinking about yourself. Normally, that's healthy. It's how you process your day and make sense of your life. But researchers found that in people who ruminate, the default mode network becomes hyper-connected to a region called the subgenual prefrontal cortex, a region linked to withdrawal and sadness. When that connection strengthens, self-reflection becomes self-punishment. Every quiet moment, every drive, every shower, every sleepless hour, the network replays the grievance. Not because you choose to, because the circuit is stuck. And here's where it compounds. Mechanism 1 feeds Mechanism 3. The pain signal keeps the replay running, and Mechanism 2 rewards it. 3 independent mechanisms: pain, reward, and replay, all locking the grudge in place. But none of this explains why the anger gets harder to release over time. For that, you need to understand what happens when you fall asleep. Stage 3, the 24-hour window. Every memory you form starts out fragile. When something happens to you, good or bad, the memory is stored temporarily in the hippocampus. At this point, the memory is labile, meaning it can still be rewritten. In 2000, a landmark study published in Nature proved this. Researchers showed that when a consolidated memory is recalled, it temporarily becomes unstable again and requires new protein synthesis to re-harden. That reopening is called the reconsolidation window, and it has a timer. In 2010, researchers translated this to humans. They conditioned people to fear a stimulus, then reactivated the fear memory. If the intervention happened within 10 minutes of reactivation, the fear was gone. Even a year later. If the intervention happened 6 hours later, the original fear was fully intact. The window had closed. 6 hours. That's how long your brain gives you to rewrite an emotional memory before it re-hardens. Now, here's what happens when you fall asleep with unresolved anger. Your sleeping brain does something critical with emotional memories. It consolidates them. Specifically, the sleeping brain gives emotional memories priority treatment. Anger, fear, betrayal, these get consolidated first. Research from Matthew Walker's lab at UC Berkeley showed that REM sleep is supposed to function as emotional first aid. During REM, your brain replays the memory in a low-stress neurochemical environment, stripping the emotional charge while preserving the facts. That's the healthy version. That's what sleep is supposed to do with difficult emotions. But Walker's research showed something else. When a person goes to sleep still activated, still angry, still ruminating, the consolidation process doesn't strip the emotion. It reinforces it. The memory migrates from the hippocampus, temporary storage, to the cortex, permanent storage. And the emotional charge goes with it. Sleep deprivation makes it worse. Walker's 2007 study showed that without proper sleep, the amygdala, your brain's threat detection center, becomes 60% more reactive to negative stimuli. And the connection between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex, your emotional brakes, goes dark. So the first night you sleep on unresolved anger, the memory hardens. The second night, it migrates deeper. By the time you've slept on it for a week, the resentment isn't a feeling anymore. It's architecture. And this is exactly where Paul's instruction becomes extraordinary. Stage 4, Paul's instruction. Paul didn't write Ephesians from a study. He wrote it from a Roman prison cell. He had been beaten, stoned, shipwrecked, betrayed by people he'd trusted, and abandoned by communities he'd built. If anyone had earned the right to hold a grudge, it was him. Ephesians 4:26. Be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger. Read that again. He doesn't say don't be angry. He says be angry. Anger is not the problem. Paul names it as a valid response. Then he gives a deadline. Do not let the sun go down. Not deal with it eventually. Not let time heal it. Before sundown. Today. Now map that onto the science. The reconsolidation window, 6 hours after emotional activation. The first night's sleep, when consolidation either heals the memory or hardens it. Before sundown lands directly inside both windows. Paul prescribed a neurological deadline 2,000 years before the science existed to confirm it. He didn't say forgive instantly. He said, process this before you sleep, while it's still labile, while your brain can still rewrite it. Because he understood, from experience, not from a lab, that anger you sleep on becomes anger you carry, and anger you carry long enough becomes part of you. If this is connecting, subscribe and drop a comment. What's the oldest anger you're still carrying? I read every one. Now, let's talk about what actually reverses this. Stage 5. What forgiveness does. Forgiveness is not a feeling. At the neurological level, it's a measurable shift in which parts of your brain are running the show. In 2013, researchers in Italy used fMRI to watch forgiveness happen in real time. When participants imagined forgiving someone who'd hurt them, 3 regions activated: the precuneus, perspective-taking, the temporoparietal junction, empathy, and the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, the part that overrides reactive anger. The brain physically shifts from threat mode to regulation mode. That's not a metaphor. That's an fMRI finding, and the body follows. In 2001, Charlotte Van Ooyen-Witvliet measured what happens physiologically when a person nurses a grudge versus imagines forgiveness. During grudge holding, heart rate spiked, blood pressure rose, skin conductance, the sweat response, increased, facial tension tightened. During forgiveness imagery, every single marker dropped. And here's the part that matters. The stress from the grudge persisted into the recovery period. Even after the exercise ended, the body didn't calm down. The anger kept running, even after they stopped thinking about it. Forgiveness doesn't just feel better, it measurably reverses the physiological damage, and the long-term data is harder to ignore. In 2012, researchers studied 1,500 adults over 66 years old. They found that conditional forgiveness, only forgiving if the other person apologizes, was a statistically significant predictor of increased mortality risk. Waiting for an apology before you forgive is associated with dying sooner. That held even after controlling for religion, demographics, and health behaviors. In 2024, the largest forgiveness study ever conducted, 4,500 people across 5 countries, showed that a self-directed forgiveness workbook, done in under 3 hours, measurably reduced unforgiveness, depression, and anxiety. Forgiveness is not soft. It is one of the most well-documented neurological interventions in the behavioral science literature. And Paul built the timing into one sentence. Stage 6. The practice. Paul's instruction isn't about moral perfection. It's maintenance. The same way Solomon's Sabbath was a weekly reset for chronic cortisol, Paul's deadline is a daily reset for emotional memory. Here's what the minimum viable version looks like, starting today. First, when anger surfaces, name it out loud. Not, I'm upset, specific. I'm angry at this person because they did this specific thing. Naming activates the prefrontal cortex. It begins the regulatory process that moves your brain from threat mode to processing mode. Second, process before sleep. Not forgive instantly. That's not what Paul said. He said before sundown. Write it. Speak it to someone. Sit with it honestly. The reconsolidation window is open. Your brain is giving you the chance to reshape the memory before sleep consolidates it. Use the window. Third, if it's old anger, years old, recall it deliberately. The window reopens every time you recall the memory. You get another chance. But you have to act within hours, not days. Paul didn't write Ephesians 4:26 as a moral lecture. He wrote it as someone who had been beaten, imprisoned, and betrayed, and discovered that anger has a deadline. Miss the deadline, and the anger hardens overnight. Meet it, and your brain can let it go. That window opens every day. The sun goes down every night. The sun is going to go down tonight. What you do with your anger before it does, that's the window.